So let's discuss about the project management plan. A project management plan falls under 5 process groups. It will be starting once after the initiation phase completes. A project plan, also known as the project management plan. It is a document that describes how the project will be executed, monitored, controlled, and closed. Project planning is a crucial stage that comes right after the initiation in project management phase. A project plan, according to the project management body of knowledge, is a formal approved document used to guide both project execution and project control. The project manager creates the project management plan. The plan should be agreed and approved by project management team, and its key stakeholders. The project plan consists of key process elements or components. In the project plan, the key process elements are, you can see in the below, the scope, approach, objective, requirement management, schedule management, human resource management, cost budget management, quality management, communication management, issue management, procurement management, resource management, risk management, stakeholder management, change management, configuration management, and performance management. In this video, let's discuss about the key process element, which is the scope. A scope refers to all the work involved in creating the deliverables of the project and the process used to create them. Scope means what work required to be done on the project. Collecting the requirement is the first process in the project scope knowledge area. Collecting the requirements is the process of determining, documenting, and managing the stakeholders' needs and requirement to meet project objectives. The scope will be further classified within the scope or out of the scope. Defines what is within the scope and what is out of scope. Within the scope means what work that is required to be completed within the project. Out of scope means nothing extra work done on the project. Nothing extra work required to do on the project. Scope refers to all the work involved in creating the deliverables of the project and the process used to create them. As you see in this slide, okay, the scope, you can have the product scope and the project scope. Product scope, which is more oriented towards the functional requirements. Project scope, which is more on work oriented. Product scope focuses more on features, components, functionality, and rather not focusing on the amount of work or what work to be done. So project scope, all the work that need to be done to make the product. Here you are going to see how you are going to work to achieve this requirement. Project scope is a part of project planning process group. A project scope tells out what the work will include and also what it won't include. It means what is within scope, which is inclusive, and what is out of scope, which is exclusive. The scope document contains the list of activities, features, project objectives, deliverables, as well as a list of stakeholders for the successful completion of the project. The scope is defined by understanding the project requirement and the client's expectation. It is typically written by the project manager. At the beginning of the work, gather all the expectations and requirement from the stakeholders. This requirement prioritized as per the business case and project requirement. Then understand the business case and working within the scope and eliminating out of scope. Then based on the business case, a breakdown structure is to be done. Scope develops a detailed description of product and project scope. Product scope means how the product look like, how it will function, what are the product features, more towards the functional requirements. Product scope are more towards the functional requirement. Project scope is also known as scope statement. It defines the requirement of the product. So here you can see the steps for creating a scope management plan. So at the initial stage here, for creating a scope management plan, you need to first do the planning the scope, collecting the requirements, defining the scope, creating work breakdown structure, validating the scope, and controlling the scope. Planning the scope to till validating the scope, which falls under the planning process group, while controlling the scope falls under the fourth process group, which is monitoring and control. So specifically in the controlling the scope process group, which falls under the control process group. So baseline, what does exactly a baseline means? In the project management plan, a baseline in project management is a clearly defined starting point from your project plan. It is a fixed reference point to measure and compare your project progress. This slide you can see the scope baseline. So let's discuss about what is exactly a scope baseline. Scope baseline is a component of the project management plan. A scope baseline is a part of the project plan. It defines the agreed goals, deliverables, and scope of the work of a project. It documents the agreement of the relevant stakeholders and gives the project a work structure as well as guidance in the day-to-day work. The scope baseline includes project scope statement, work breakdown structure, and WBS dictionary, as shown in the slide. A scope baseline is the approved version of a scope statement, work breakdown structure, and its associated WBS dictionary. Scope baseline can be changed only through formal control procedures and is used as a basis for comparison. So let's discuss about the work breakdown structure. In the work breakdown structure, WBS is an hierarchical breakdown of work. Here you will subdivide projects into smaller pieces. Each descending level represents an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. Lowest level the WBS component can be scheduled, cost estimated, monitored, and controlled. Work breakdown structure is the process of breaking down the work into smaller tasks and more manageable components of the project deliverables. WBS provides a framework of what has to be delivered. A work breakdown structure is a method of organizing and completing work in a project. A work breakdown structure is a visual, hierarchical, and deliverable oriented decomposition of a project. A WBS is a hierarchical breakdown of work. Here you will subdivide project into smaller pieces. Each descending level represent an increasingly detailed definition of the project work. Lowest level WBS components can be scheduled, cost estimated, monitored, and controlled. A work breakdown structure is not a document where it shows all the list of activities performed in a project. Rather, it is a document referred to the deliverables that are result of the activity of a project and not to the activity itself. In simple words, WBS is deliverable oriented, not activity oriented. WBS is a hierarchical decomposition of work. A WBS is a process of subdividing the project deliverables and project work into smaller or more manageable components. WBS provides a structured vision of what has to be delivered. In this slide, you can analyze when exactly the statement of work and even the project scope statement, when exactly the scope statement will be prepared. Okay, the statement of work is an input to the project charter, which will be developed during the initiation stage. The project scope statement is an output from the project charter, which will be developed during the planning stage. A project statement is not just another piece of paper. It is the foundation for your project plan. According to the PMI, a guide to the project management body of knowledge, a scope statement has three major parts: project justification, project deliverable, and project objectives. So this scope statement is typically written by the project manager. A scope statement outlines the entire project, including any deliverables and their features, as well as a list of stakeholders who will be affected. It will also include any major project objectives, deliverables, and goals to help measure success. In the scope statement, there are 8 key steps to develop a project scope statement. They are: understand why the project was initiated, define the key objectives of the project, outline the project statement of work, identify major deliverables, select key milestones, identify major constraints, list scope exclusions, obtain sign off. Tools and techniques are expert judgment and decomposition. Outputs are scope baseline, project document updates, project scope creep. It is typically caused by key project stakeholders changing requirements or something by internal miscommunication. So during the project process, uncontrolled changes that led to extra work of the project team. A change request is requested from the client. A project management is responsible to avoid scope creep. So here a scope creep is nothing but a change request from the customer or the stakeholder. An example of scope creep is that there are many times when clients do not explain their vision properly, which may lead to the project manager failing to specify the project scope. Most of the causes of this deviation can be avoided if the project manager improve their task management. Scope creep is occurred due to the deviation of the project from the original scope through the addition of new features or new change requests. It starts with a very small change request that you don't mind doing. These requests slowly start to pile up and ultimately lead to huge problems. There are numerous reasons why the scope of a project changes. Small changes in the requirements eventually snowball into new features. Another reason can be the change in the management of the client's company. An example of scope creep is that there are times when clients do not explain their vision properly, which may lead to the project manager failing to specify the project's scope properly. There are numerous reasons why the scope of the project changes. Some of them may be poorly defined project scope, lack of project management practices, addition of unrequested features, the communication gap between project stakeholders, lack of uniformity in the client's requirement. Project scope creep is usually disastrous for the project, but there are instances when diverging from the original becomes acceptable. Since many projects run over the course of several years, there can be changes in the market dynamics or in the customer's requirement, which causes the project to expand. Few issues that are caused by scope creeps are lack of communication, lack of experience in project scope, poor goal settings. It is important to know that you cannot completely eliminate scope creep from your projects. Customer demands might change in the middle of the project. So you should always be prepared for some changes which act as an advantage. The following are some of the advantages of scope creep in an organization. Improves customer retention, ensures market compatibility, increases revenue, optimizes the team processes. So here we can't avoid screw creep completely. And in some cases, a small deviation from the original plan is necessary for the success of the project. You can handle scope creep in the project where the goal of the project manager should be to manage scope creep in such a way that ensures the success of the project and leaves the client satisfied with your service. If we keep on saying no to every single request to the clients, the client will not be satisfied.